his work for his own description on that. They might be interested as well. I have my own podcast as well, and I interviewed Professor Rush week before last. If they'd like to check that out, they can go to the GnosticMedia.com website and go to the podcast button. It'll take them to, or it's GnosticMedia.podomatic.com is the page there, so they can find that. But I highly recommend people look at it. It is, in fact, I think, from my own personal opinion, the most important discovery in regards to religious studies made in the last century or more.
Yeah, I heard that interview you did, and it's very interesting. I highly encourage people to go over there and listen to it. It's absolutely fascinating. And, how do you think this will change, or will it change in any way the theology, primarily Christian beliefs? Is that what you're hoping for here, or do you feel that this is such a monumental structure we're facing, and it needs more in order to understand it better and to break down some of the mythology surrounding Christianity? What do you think, John?
Well, the first thing people need to recognize is that Christianity is a political system. It's not a spiritual system. It's always been designed to control the masses, and when they realize the manipulation of historical information and the suppression of information and the extermination of indigenous peoples across Europe and the usurpation of their beliefs and things like that, I think it will wake a lot of people up. The question is, will people pay attention?
Right.
And whether or not it happens quickly or slowly. Obviously, it's taken us 38 years from the publication of Allegro's book to now for academics to really start rethinking Allegro's proposals and not be so blind to it. And I think a big part of the problem is in the 1960s, Allegro first proposed that Christianity was based on drugs back in 1967, which was actually before Gordon Wasson, and most people are not aware of that. They think that Allegro had stolen the idea from Wasson's book, Soma, Divine Mushroom of Immortality, but we've found numerous newspaper articles a year before then where Allegro had already gone public. So, these arguments are fairly baseless. But refresh your question to me again.
Well, it was more about how, if you think that this will in any way affect or change Christianity. We're talking about this idea of. Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was getting at. The thing is it's taken 37 years or 38 years up to now to go this far, but suddenly now, where we had one book on the topic before, and then plus Clark Heinrich published his Magic Mushrooms and Religion and Alchemy back in the 90s, which also argued mushrooms in Judeo-Christianity, but not that Jesus was the mushroom himself. I think now with Rush's book and my new book, plus Astrotheology and Shamanism, Jack Hare's new book coming out, and then Professor Carl Ruck from Boston University has a new book coming out next year called Entheogens and Christianity. So we've reached a point where there's going to start being a flood of information in this regard. And the question really comes down to how fast the information gets out there, how fast the academic community picks it up, and then as well as how quickly, your mainstream, what'll happen first is your average Christian will realize it, and then the fanatics will be slow to die as always because they don't read anything outside the Bible regardless.
Right. So, Allegro's work was suppressed, and the discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls, to me at least, feels like it was the same deal there. Once they began to notice or discover what was contained in there, that too became suppressed. And do you know if the team that he worked with, if they interpreted things exactly as Allegro did, or did they just try to explain it away and say no, it's this and not this? Allegro is totally off here. Do you know?
Well, they always attacked Allegro for his translations, and they attacked Allegro over the Copper Scroll, saying that it was a treasure map and things like that. And since then, Dr. Philip Davies, or Professor Philip Davies from the University of Sheffield, and as well as Professor George J. Brooke, have gone out public, and these are major Dead Sea Scrolls academics today, gone out public stating that Allegro was correct, that in fact it was a treasure scroll. So there have been many academics that have come out and said, yeah, this area of Allegro's work was correct. We need to reanalyze that. Some have come out and said that these translations are so bad they're not usable. But see, what people have to realize is that Allegro was fighting against the rest of the team members nonstop, and for the first from 1954 when Allegro, or 1953-54 when Allegro joined the Dead Sea Scrolls team, until 1991 when this guy Dr. Robert Eisenman at the University of Long Beach, California, released the first translations, and that was in 91. From 54 to 91, we really had no translations of anything that the Dead Sea Scrolls said except for what Allegro provided us.
Yes.
So, Allegro was really the only source from the scrolls. They were so suppressed, and every time he published anything, the rest of the team would attack him for it. And he was the one that was really out there in the public light, getting the scrolls known, getting funding to save the scrolls. Private collectors and libraries and various people all over the world had snatched up most of the scrolls, so Allegro had basically put it upon himself to go out and meet with the museums and libraries and universities and private investors to get them to donate money to buy back the scrolls from these private collectors to be able to save them. And that's, there's a couple of characters online that like to twist all of this information, and they've told me personally that they've never read any of Allegro's books, and they have podcasts and they do YouTube videos and things like that are just complete garbage and complete lack of understanding of Allegro's history and the things that went on there. And it's really unfortunate that again people attack work that they've never read, which seems to be 99.9% of the case. It's pretty rare when this field of research is attacked by people who have actually taken the time to study it. Yeah,
it's a shame, absolutely. And so in your opinion then, I mean, do you think that Allegro's discoveries, how should I put it, take away some kind of, credibility around Christianity, or does it kind of add to it? Does it spice it up? What do you think?
Well, it's twofold in actuality, and that's what it does is it makes you have a real appreciation for what Christianity was meant to be. When you understand that the Eucharist is the mushroom, when you understand that when Jesus says, take my flesh and eat my body and drink my blood, either, are we talking about a cannibalistic religion, which poses an even bigger problem, or are we talking about Christianity being based on entheogenic substances, which is really the case with almost every other religion in the world. So when we stop trying to think that that Christianity is the exception and that there's no way because Jesus appeared from nowhere and therefore everything written in the Bible is fact without any historical references to back most of what happened in the Bible. When we lay down these absurd assumptions, we begin to see these things unfold. And, anyway, go ahead.
Well, regarding like the mythological story then of let's say Christ, and let's even tie it into the entheogenic connection here, does that still, in your opinion, have a valuable mythological teaching, so to speak, that we can learn from?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it basically comes down to a lot of people who were doing a lot of entheogens and trying to describe the experience, and then it eventually got usurped by people who had no knowledge of the direct experience themselves. Either that, or shamans, and shamans eventually became priests, and shamans are known for huckstery and joking and things like that, and lying as well. So They're known to be expert of sleight of hand, and shamans and priests keep themselves in power by keeping their secrets secret, and priests become kingships, and kingships become empires, and that's the way things go. So
in your opinion, it's built on a weak foundation, so to speak, and would be fairly kind of easy then to actually pick holes in the foundation and make the whole thing collapse, right?
Well, it is, and contrary to some of the other researchers out there, I feel that Christianity is based on three primary foundations. The first being fertility worship, and that may startle a lot of your listeners. The second being entheogens, and the third being sun worship and astrotheology that everyone likes to attack scholars like Acharya S for. But I think if people look beyond their predetermined conclusions from their own religious background, and if they just approach everything from having no religious background and being completely open instead of already deciding my religion is correct, then they'll discover that these ancient religions have a lot more in common than most people suspect. And really, what often happens is when people research these things, they focus on the differences instead of the similarities. And when you begin to focus on the similarities, that's when you begin to see the correlations between Jesus and John the Baptist, and Jesus and Tutankhamun and some of the ancient Egyptian kings, and Jesus and Mithra. And Mithra was the male-only war god of Rome that Rome had adopted from Persia. And as Professor Carl Ruck discusses in his recent book, The Hidden World, the similarities between Christianity and Mithraism were so similar that only the names of the deity had to be changed. And that's been argued, obviously, by other scholars. And, so people who think that there are no other scholars arguing these things and talking about this stuff, I really suggest you get off Wikipedia and Encyclopedia Britannica and get out there and crack open the books and read the journals.
Right. Okay, let's spend a little time and talk about Gordon Wasson then, and then after that point we can kind of talk about the schism, or that might actually come up in context when we address Gordon Wasson. But do a little brief overview for us regarding Wasson and some of his work.
Well, Gordon Wasson. I'm actually going to start a little bit earlier in Wasson's history than is typically known about him. In Wasson's early part of his life, he was a vice president to J.P. Morgan Bank. J.P. Morgan Chase is the bank that actually just took over most of the American economy this last month in this huge U.S. government bailout, which I think is ridiculous in a supposed free market capitalist system, which they've just proven failed by that very action.
Yeah.
And so Gordon Wasson worked directly for J.P. Morgan, and he was probably one of the ones on Jekyll Island when the Federal Reserve Act was put into place and things like that. So Wasson has an interesting banking history. He was also the account manager to the Vatican and had private sessions with the Pope. And so he was a high-powered.
Sorry to interrupt you, John, but that would be for some people then